I sat across from my husband in the soft glow of the overhead fixtures, the gentle clatter of silverware, and low murmur of other diners, creating a cocoon of normalcy around us. My hands hovered over the crisp white napkin on my lap, but my heart pounded against my ribs as if it wanted to burst free. When he'd called me earlier that afternoon, his voice had been calm but insistent. He asked me to trust him at dinner tonight. The words echoed in my mind now, playful but laced with something deeper. He smiled at me across the table, those familiar blue eyes warm with affection, and set a sleek black folder beside my plate. I reached out, fingers brushing the smooth leather cover. It felt heavier than I expected, like the weight of all our unspoken truths pressed into something tangible. My pulse quickened as I undid the magnetic clasp. Inside lay a stack of printed documents, each page meticulously organized, clipped, tabulated with receipts and statements. A small photo slipped out and fluttered to the table. I picked it up and recognized it immediately, a snapshot of our little house on Willow Street, front porch bathed in morning light, our names engraved in brass on the mailbox. I'd taken dozens of photos of our home, but never ones like this. Angles I didn't recall photographing. Questions crowded into my mind, but I kept my expression calm, waiting for him to explain. He reached across the table, brushing away our stray hair from my face. His touch was reassuring, familiar, the same gesture he used when I woke from nightmares about lost opportunities or forgotten promises. He opened his own folder, revealing his notes. He spoke softly, each word deliberate, as though he were guiding me through a carefully choreographed dance. He told me about his plan to surprise me, how he'd been saving for months to restore the house's original charm, to fix the rotting fence and repaint the siding in the color I'd once admired on a local historical tour. The receipts in my folder corresponded to deposits he'd made, materials ordered, contractors consulted. He kept every detail to himself because he wanted today to be perfect. The initial shock faded, replaced by a warm surge of gratitude so strong it threatened to spill over my composure. I traced the edges of the photo with my fingertip, picturing the new porch swing he'd mentioned, the planters he'd ordered for spring blooms. I imagined my morning sipping coffee in that fresh, restored space, the late afternoon sun slanting through the trees and painting golden streaks across my book pages. For months, I'd been overwhelmed by deadlines at work and the relentless pace of our daily routines. He'd watched me scramble, barely able to catch my breath, and carried this secret burden alone until he could gift it to me all at once. I closed the folder slowly, noticing the casual confidence in his posture. I realized how little I'd seen of his silent struggles, his small sacrifices. He'd deferred his own vacation fund to pay the workers, chosen cheaper dinners out so he could save more. The documents detailed every penny. I felt a lump form in my throat as I met his gaze. He'd asked me to trust him, and I had hesitated, my mind racing with doubts about what I might find. But here, in that quiet moment, I saw the depth of his commitment to our shared dreams. He wasn't just restoring a house. He was reaffirming his love in the most tangible way he knew how. A waiter appeared with our salads, placing them gently between us. I watched a small droplet of vinaigrette roll down my lettuce leaf and felt a surge of thankfulness that this moment existed. He squeezed my hand under the table, and I gave him a shy smile, the kind that remembers our wedding day laughter and the shy glances we exchanged under the ceremony lights. My chest warmed with relief and pride. I wondered why he hadn't told me sooner, but then I realized that his surprise had been part of the gift. He wanted to show me that I could rely on him to carry burdens, to nurture our life together even when I was too busy to notice. Each detail in the folder felt like a love letter written in receipts and balance sheets. I studied the dates and vendors, impressed by the thoroughness of his plan. He'd consulted a local historian about the original paint at the turn of the century and found reclaimed wooden beams to match the house's era. The images of craftsmen sanding floorboards and repainting shutters had been delivered straight to my inbox under the guise of junk mail. He'd known I'd find those out-of-place messages and keep them hidden in a folder until tonight. I laughed softly at the cleverness of his scheme. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my folded hands as I listened to him outline the next steps. He described the unveiling party he wanted to throw next month, inviting only our closest friends and neighbours. He pictured us standing beside the newly restored porch, toasting to perseverance and partnership. I could almost taste the sparkling cider and hear the murmur of congratulations echoing across the lawn. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely at ease, buoyed by the knowledge that we were on the same team, striving toward the same vision. I looked back at the closed folder, and then into his eyes. I nodded, voice thick with emotion. I told him I trusted him completely, and he grinned, relief washing over his face. We placed our hands on top of the folder together, a silent pact. Around us, the restaurant's ambient noise faded into insignificance. Right then, it was just us, a folder, and the promise of a renewed home filled with warmth and possibility. I leaned back in my chair, ready for the next course, and for the next chapter of our lives together. The next morning, I woke before dawn, sunlight filtering through our bedroom curtains in soft, golden bands. My body ached pleasantly from the late-night excitement, and I lay still for a moment, listening to the hum of the city stirring outside. I thought of the folder on my husband's lap, each page a testament to his love and dedication. Quietly, I dressed and slipped downstairs, craving another glimpse of our little house in progress. Outside, the air was cool and damp, the early spring breeze carrying the scent of damp earth and budding lilacs. My heart fluttered with anticipation as I unlocked the front gate and stepped onto the dusty pathway, eager to see what had changed overnight. The yard was a flurry of activity. A crew of 3 men, clad in paint-speckled overalls, worked beneath bright safety helmets, their voices low but energetic. The old porch railings lay piled neatly nearby, ready to be stripped and repainted. My breath caught when I saw the new shutters leaning against the siding, their crisp, creamy white finish gleaming against the pale blue of the house. Yet the ground underfoot was churned to a thick, muddy soup, and the front steps still bare would look fragile and vulnerable. I hesitated at the threshold, torn between excitement and worrying, wondering whether I'd find evidence of rushed or sloppy work. One of the painters noticed me standing and wiped his hand on his pant leg before offering a friendly nod. "Morning. Ma'am, we'll have the porch painted by this afternoon," he said, voice warm beneath his gruff exterior. His assurance should have comforted me, but I found my brow furrowing instead. My mind raced with questions about timelines and permits had. My husband secured everything properly. I watched the man dip his brush into a can of primer, then glanced back at me as though weighing whether to invite me closer. Unable to stay silent, I asked about the permit process, and he shrugged, muttering something about a city inspector coming later that morning. My pulse quickened. I pulled out my phone and dialed my husband's number. It rang twice before he answered, his tone bright. "Hey love, did you come check it out already?" he asked, relief and disappointment mingled in his voice. I told him about the inspector, comment, and there was a brief pause, a rustling sound as though he'd dropped my Callaway into a pocket. Then he spoke again. "They had to delay one thing, but it's under control. Don't worry, just keep me posted, okay?" The confidence in his voice was almost convincing, but my teeth clenched as I remembered the trust he'd asked for just last night. I promised to send him photos and hung up, torn between faith and doubt, determined to nurture my trust rather than my suspicion. I took deep breaths and walked around the side of the house, where a new flower bed was taking shape. The soil had been freshly turned, rows of tulip bulbs planted with precision. A handwritten stake, "Higa's Love Project," was casually pressed into the ground. I smiled despite myself, imagining the blossoms bursting through the earth next spring. Memories of the early days of our marriage surfaced. Lazy weekends spent planting daisies and daylilies in my grandmother's backyard, when responsibilities felt light and laughter came easily. I felt my heart soften, recalling how he'd always been the more patient gardener of the two of us. By noon, the inspector arrived, a middle-aged woman with a clipboard and an aura of authority. She moved methodically from porch to siding, tapping her pen against the new beams and inspecting the restored door frames. I hovered nearby, offering coffee and water, trying to appear casual even as my chest tightened. After what felt like an eternity, she handed me a stamped permit and nodded. "Everything looks in order," she said crisply. Just make sure the final coat of paint cures properly before you close her up. I exhaled audibly and tucked the document into my bag, picturing my husband's relieved grin when I reported back. The day suddenly felt brighter. The noisy drills and paint splashes a chorus of triumph rather than chaos. That evening, overwhelmed by the day's events, I retreated to my home office to finish a report overdue for my marketing team. My eyelids drooped as I reread bullet points and performance metrics, but an incoming email alert jolted me upright. It was from Higa, time-stamped only minutes before, for photos of the freshly painted porch, the new white railings crisp against the pale blue siding, and a small wooden sign he'd crafted himself a haven hanging where the old one used to be. A fifth image was a close-up of a tiny succulent nursery box he'd built for me, complete with lavender and jade plants. My throat tightened at the sight of his handiwork, and I felt tears of gratitude prick my eyes. I texted him back immediately, praising every detail, and he replied with a string of heart emojis and an invitation to visit the site at sunset. I saved my work and hurried out the door, the late afternoon sun bathing the street in warm amber light. When I arrived, the crew had left for the day, and only the glow of the setting sun illuminated the porch. I ran my fingers over the smooth railings, inhaled the scent of fresh paint, and sank into one of the new rocking chairs he'd had delivered. It creaked softly under my weight, and I closed my eyes, picturing us here next month with friends gathered around. Just then, Mrs. Thompson, from 2 doors down, ambled over, her gardening gloves still on. She beamed at me. "Your husband's done a marvelous job," she said. "I can't wait to see the party." This block needed a bit of cheer. Her approval felt like a gentle pat on the back, reinforcing that this labor was more than just home improvement. It was a gift to our community, a renewal of warmth and neighborliness. I thanked her and promised to invite her to the unveiling, feeling a swell of pride I hadn't realized I'd missed. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, Higo appeared, wiping sweat from his brow. He opened his arms wide, and I fell into them, my head resting against his chest. We stood quietly for a moment, listening to the neighborhood lull into evening, the distant bark of a door, the soft hum of a passing car. He apologized for the morning's permit scare, explaining how a minor paperwork snafu had almost derailed the schedule. I whispered back that I trusted him again, more than ever, because he'd handled it with the same steadfast care he'd shown all along. Together, we stood on that porch and finished, but full of promise, our hands entwined, ready for whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. The evening of the unveiling arrived with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming hydrangeas. I stepped onto the porch just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of lavender and rose. The string lights my husband had strung overhead glowed softly, their bulbs cradled and delicate were cages that cast warm, golden pools on the pale blue siding. I smoothed the hem of my dresser, simple navy sheath I'd picked up on sale last spring, and took a steadying breath. Tonight was not only a celebration of our home's renewal, but a testament to the trust we had rebuilt together. Guests began to trickle in. Neighbors whose names I knew, but faces I had yet to greet. Friends from book club balancing wine glasses and platters of hors d'oeuvres, colleagues from work clutching small wrapped gifts. Each time someone stepped between the white railings of the porch, I offered them a genuine smile. My heart fluttering with excitement, I introduced my husband. As the architect of it all, his shoulders straight with pride as he shook hands and accepted congratulations. Children darted between adults, chasing fireflies in the yard, their laughter ringing against the soft strum of acoustic guitar music drifting from a corner speaker. A long wooden table stood at the far end of the porch, covered in a crisp linen cloth and laden with dishes, a vibrant caprese salad with heirloom tomatoes and basil, my grandmother's lemon bars arranged on a glass pedestal, bowls of roasted vegetables, seasoned with rosemary from our garden. Higa had insisted on catering. From the little bistro down the street, the one where we'd shared countless date night dinners before life grew busy and our budgets tightened. I caught his eye and mouthed a thank you, remembering how he'd slipped away one afternoon to place the order, careful not to arouse my suspicion. As twilight deepened, I took my place beside him at the head of the table. He cleared his throat and raised a crystal flute of sparkling cider, my preferred celebratory drink since I was cutting back on alcohol, and the chatter hushed. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice steady and warm. "This house has stood here for nearly a century, and thanks to hard work and a little love, it will stand for another 100 years, he nodded toward me. But none of this would have happened without my partner in life, who inspires me every day. I felt my cheeks warm as I glanced at the freshly laid floorboards beneath our feet, each one sanded and stained to perfection, and I squeezed his hand. The first toast echoed around us, glasses raised under the glow of Edison bulbs. My chest swelled as neighbors murmured about how welcoming our home looked again, how the freshly painted shutters brightened the block. I watched the children chase each other around the yard, their shadows dancing on the lawn, and I felt a deep sense of belonging. In that moment, I understood that the house was more than just a structure. It was a living space stitched into the fabric of our community, alive with the sounds and sense of shared experiences. After the formal remarks, the party unwound into a comfortable hum. I drifted among clusters of guests, refilling plates and laughing at stories of neighborhood lore. The time old man Patterson's cat got stuck in our oak tree, the annual block barbecue that ended with unexpected rain showers. A few folks lingered on the porch steps, commenting on the craftsmanship, the way the rail spindles matched the period detail, the subtle distressing on the new hardwood floors. Each compliment felt like another stitch in the tapestry of trust and restoration we had woven together. Later, as the sky deepened into indigo, and the string lights blinked on in starlit unison, Higo and I found a quiet moment alone. We sank into the rocking chairs he'd installed, their gentle creak almost hypnotic against the backdrop of distant laughter. He handed me a small box of belated anniversary gift he confessed he'd forgotten until the planning of this reveal reminded him. Inside was a slender silver locket etched with our wedding date. I opened it to find two tiny photographs, one of us on our wedding day, the other snapped just that afternoon, his arm around me as I surveyed the finished porch. My throat tightened with emotion. "You thought of everything," I whispered. He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "I wanted tonight to capture not just the new paint and railings, but everything that brought us here, our past joys, challenges, and the reasons I still fall in love with you every day." I leaned in and kissed him softly, grateful that this home, like our marriage, had been strengthened by patient effort and unwavering faith. We lingered there as the guests slowly drifted away, waving fond goodbyes and promising to come by with mason jars of fresh lemonade once the hydrangeas bloomed. The breeze picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak tree overhead. I closed my eyes and breathed in the crisp night air, feeling the solidity of the porch beneath me and the gentle weight of the locket resting against my chest. In that quiet, lantern-lit moment, I realized that true restoration of houses, of relationships, of trust took time, attention, and the courage to open that folder, to share hidden plans, and to believe in the possibility of something renewed. When we finally turned off the string lights and stepped inside the warm glow of our living room, I paused in the doorway and looked back at the porch one last time. It stood ready for sunrise, its fresh paint gleaming under the street lamp's glow, an open invitation to mornings filled with coffee, conversations, and unhurried moments. I took Igor's hand and whispered, "Let's make every morning feel as hopeful as this." He nodded, and together we stepped forward, closing the door behind us on one chapter and opening it on the next, confident, connected, and at home in a future we'd built together.